As we know, a lot happened over the course of this year that will go down in history as a pivotal moment for the entire global population. We all know some of the major events that took place as they affected all of us in some way, shape, or form. What started out as optimism at the beginning of the new decade quickly turned into remote working, mask mandates, and uncertainty just a few months in. But during all of this pandemonium, one particular trend within the healthcare industry experienced a massive boost in its usage. When people couldn't visit their doctor over fear of exposure, they instead turned to the internet. Thus, telehealth stepped in. Hi everyone, I'm Matt from Tactics, and today I'm going to explain 5 key areas to keep in mind with telehealth trends. Before we get started though, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking the button below. While you're down there, hit the alert bell icon next to it as well, so when we post new helpful content, you get notified. The first area of change within telehealth is that this industry has experienced exponential boosts in adaptation by providers. Doctors actively promoted telehealth services because they could still hold appointments without risking exposing others to illness. As a result, telehealth usage, acceptance, and development all accelerated dramatically. In April this past year, visits to primary care doctors were down by 60%. But it's not like other appointments didn't happen at all. Instead, they were held virtually. Around 1.6 million telehealth encounters occurred in the first 3 months of 2020, according to the CDC. By the end of the year, telehealth visits increased by 350 times more than what they were prior to the pandemic that happened. There were so many appointments held that even the most skeptical providers grew more fond of the experience that telehealth offers. 57% of providers view these services more favorably than they did before the pandemic. But the idea of remote healthcare isn't new. In fact, a 1925 cover of Science and Invention magazine envisioned a device that would allow for video appointments. We're almost 100 years later, and that cover quickly became a reality this year. The second area about telehealth trends involves patients directly. Their landscape is changing. An industry is only as popular as its consumers allow it to be. That sounds like a poetic statement, but it makes some sense. Clients drive demand. In the past, patients weren't as open to trying telehealth services. This was either because they didn't have the technology to join appointments from their devices, or because they didn't feel comfortable with it. But there's some good news for this industry. 83% of patients expect to use telemedicine after the pandemic resolves. This is dramatically different than what it was just 1 year earlier, when only 1/4 of all patients didn't even consider telehealth appointments. The majority of them are also satisfied with the remote appointments. 68% of patients rated virtual video visits at a 9 or 10 on a 10-point scale. Did I mention that using these services came with a lot of perks to them as well? Patients save over 100 minutes of their time with remote appointments. 91% of them agree that telemedicine would help them adhere to appointments and manage prescription refills. And 55% of them say that they're willing to use telehealth with a doctor that they don't even know yet. These are all interesting statistics that prove that patients are starting to understand what's so great about telehealth services. The third area to keep in mind with telehealth deals with the facts that payment isn't fully fleshed out yet, and not every patient has access to its services. There's a lot of different parties involved that have an influence on the price for healthcare services that ultimately lands on the patient's lap. Thus, the payment structure for remote care isn't entirely fleshed out quite yet. Not to mention the explosion in popularity that happened this past year, as proven in the earlier section that I talked about in this video. The end result is a mixed bag of state mandates and convenience fees. But what you need to keep in mind is that only 20% of states require payment parity between telemedicine and in-person services, and many physicians charge a convenience fee for the patient ranging from $30 to $130 per visit. Fourth, telehealth's virtual nature may bring forth vulnerability. Imagine having a video appointment with your doctor where you're talking about a sensitive personal topic. While you're explaining the ailment you're experiencing to your physician, someone hacks their way into your session and doesn't say anything. They just sit in the background recording everything that's happening. Now that's a pretty scary scenario, isn't it? The FBI coined the term Zoom bombing to describe these instances after receiving multiple reports of this happening. I'm not even mentioning the fact that telehealth providers experienced a 30% increase in targeted attacks throughout 2020. Interestingly enough though, there's an overall positive outlook for both patients and healthcare providers, as only 2% of telemedicine users surveyed say security is their main concern with telemedical systems used. Finally, not every patient has the technology required to have a remote appointment. Many telehealth services require a standard 1.5 megabyte per second internet speed for both upload and download speeds to effectively view audio and video details. But around 30% of rural areas don't have access to high-speed broadband internet that meets the minimum benchmarks set forth by the Federal Communications Commission. Further, 29% of them still don't own a smartphone. Although one of telehealth's biggest perks is its accessibility, Those two statistics make it much harder for rural population to use these services. Of course, with technology also comes technical problems. Telemedicine encounters face a technical challenge almost 40% of the time. Telehealth is an exciting new technology that grew in popularity a lot over the past year. But that doesn't mean there still isn't some more adaptability that needs to happen before these services reach their full potential. If you'd like to learn more about telehealth and their trends, statistics, etc., reach out to eTactics. And you already made this far into the video, so you might as well like it, share it, and comment below. Well, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to our YouTube channel.